What's up, YouTube? Welcome in. I am John Kurtz, with you here each and every Sunday, as I always am, and I hope that you guys appreciate. I hope that you guys appreciate the shirt that I have on today. Okay, so I'm trying to remember. Let me adjust my mic here a little bit for you guys. I'm trying to remember who specifically it is that in the chat is always telling me to go buy a new T-shirt, right? So I decided to skip out on the typical black shirt that I would wear, or just like plain tee that I would typically wear, and instead I got you this nice Big 12 Now on ESPN Plus polo that I have from the broadcast that I've done for Big 12 Now on ESPN Plus. And that is because not only did I want to just switch it up on you today, but the big news story that we should all be talking about is that you guys are going to pay more out of your wallets to watch Big 12 content, because the Big 12 Now on ESPN Plus, ESPN Plus, the ESPN Plus price has gone up to $9.99 a month. I think it was like, what was it, $6.99 before that? I've just been paying it forever, so whatever. But yeah, the price is going up for all of you guys to watch Big 12 sports on ESPN Plus. So I figured I would commemorate the occasion with one of my Big 12 Now on ESPN Plus polos. The other ones they've given me are white, so I don't like those nearly as much. I don't feel like I rock white very well, so I went with the gray. And I'm going to be honest, I'm already a little bit out of my element. Like, this doesn't seem nearly as comfortable. I don't feel as loose and free. Feel a little bit more constricted, but I digress. I got to rep the Big 12. I got to rep Big 12 Now. I got to rep ESPN Plus because we all love ESPN so much here on this channel. Okay, so a special little treat, a little Easter egg for all you guys here today. Welcome in everybody that's in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody who's showing up. It looks like it is filling up pretty fast here. Here's the outline of where we're going today. A couple things that have happened since I last talked with you guys. One of those being, I guess you could call it a rumor. I'm calling it more a report because it came from Dan Patrick. I mean, look, he's a talk show host, but Dan Patrick is also he's got that big J in journo. I mean, he is a big J journalist, and he reported that a Big 12 school was on the wish list of SEC teams, and it was right after Florida State, Clemson, and Miami that this school came out. So we are going to talk about that because Dan Patrick is not some random YouTube channel, like this. Dan Patrick is also not just some random guy on Twitter with like 8 numbers in his name. That's a legitimate report. I mean, reporter. Like, Dan Patrick occasionally will report things, and he is not somebody that does it. He doesn't spray and pray, right? I think that's the other piece that's important here. He does not just throw reports out all the time and claim to be right about things, or only claim the things he's right about. Like, he's much more discerning than a lot of people would be when floating this out there. So I think it definitely bears talking about. It certainly bears talking about. We also have like what's turned into a very annoying, to be honest with you, flavor of the week. It feels like nationally, which is Big 12 Pac-12 merger. That seems to really be picking up steam now. It's like the Pac-12 basically said, or the schools have sort of said, and everybody kind of realized, like, hey, we're not going to do anything right now. Sounds like the Pac-12's in information gathering mode. They all want to see what these TV numbers are going to be, which makes sense. I get it. I understand why they would do that. But now it's like everybody's antsy, and we have to go straight into, well, they're going to merge then. I mean, nothing's happening now. TV numbers are probably going to be bad, so they must merge. And it just seems like there's no real evidence presented to me that would make sense for the Big 12 to be doing this. It feels like it would be a charity case for the Big 12 right now to be merging fully with the Pac-12. So we're going to get into that because the two culprits here are Dennis Dodd and Stuart Mandel, and they have come up quite a bit. Now, I'm sure there are others talking about this as well, but they each had articles about it this weekend that both in different ways rubbed me the wrong way. So, we'll rant and rave a little bit about that here today. What else? We have, there was an article in the LA Times about Caleb Williams talking about how Oklahoma fans essentially ran him out, that Oklahoma was the original number one option when he decided he was going to look around in the portal, but he saw the reaction from Oklahoma fans to him deciding to go into the portal, and that was what pushed him out. So, I mean, look, are you telling me that Oklahoma fans can act irrationally and just come after people with pitchforks and, be like jilted lovers? I wouldn't believe it. I don't know where that's coming from Caleb Williams, because I've never seen it in my life. I've never seen them come after me in that fashion over something ridiculous. I've certainly never seen them come after Caleb Williams or, a head coach or anything like that. Seems very weird and out of character for Oklahoma fans. So I'm not sure where Caleb Williams is getting that. And that's frankly why we have to discuss it, right? On the other end of the spectrum, you have Texas Tech fans who are killing it right now on the internet. And Texas Tech, after officially scaring Texas into hiding during basketball season, has now already scared TCU into hiding here for the upcoming football season. And just running circles around them. So we should probably mention that as well. I still have the Mike Gundy comments about Bedlam waiting on deck here. And as I mentioned, the ESPN Plus price is being raised. So that's what I've got on the docket for tonight. I already see some donations rolling in. You guys know, if you've been here before, the way that you get your question or comment here onto the show. Obviously, fill up the chat, have some fun. But if you want to make sure in a very crowded chat that your message gets to my attention, gets on the chat, you can donate by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That will stick it up at the top for me and ensure that you are making it on the chat here. Plus, it supports the work that I'm doing here on the channel to bring you Big 12 content week in and week out, especially at an important time for the league right now when Brett Yormark is just getting started on the job and conference realignment is hot and heavy. So appreciate all the support, those of you guys who do that. And if you could like the video, one thing that is totally free, if you could just like the video right now, give it a like, that helps me out with the YouTube algorithm, an easy way to support the channel that does not cost you a dime. So would much appreciate all of the help there. All right, let's get it started with Glenn. Glenn, thank you for the donation. As always, Glenn, much appreciated, my friend. Glenn says, good job on BYU Sports Nation. Yes, I had a lot of fun with them. I believe that was on Wednesday. I think it was same day as Big 12 Media Days got going. Did a hit with them. You can go dig it up on my Twitter account at JL Kurtz if you do want to see it. We had a really nice chat about the future of the Big 12, early impressions of Brett Yormark. Really enjoyed it. High quality, first class stuff from that crew on BYU Sports Nation. So yes, thank you for the support, and thank you BYU fans for watching that. Matt says the Athletic article shows that Washington State had higher TV numbers than Arizona. Was interesting. I just hope we really dig into the data. Yeah, Matt, I think it's a good point on a couple of fronts. One, I'm sure there is a lot of digging going on with that. And really, the only thing that matters is that you pay attention to what the TV networks tell you. Like, the TV networks theoretically would be the ones doing the real digging on that. And then they would be coming back to you and telling you, like, hey, this is what we would give you for X. This is what we would give you for Y. You know, if you had X, Y, and Z tacked onto your conference. That's what needs to be happening right now. Washington State was a really interesting case there because I've seen the same numbers you're referencing, and Washington State was like third or fourth in the Pac-12 in terms of TV eyeballs over the last X number of years. I don't remember the specifics, but I know the numbers you're referencing because I saw them and did the same double take with Washington State. Now, I mean, they're a really fun, like, Pac-12 after dark kind of squad. Like, typically, like with Mike Leach there during the Leach era, that was a really fun team and program to watch. So, I think there is probably some legitimacy to that. But, they just get thrown aside in all of this, along with Oregon State. And that was pretty fascinating to see. I mean, Utah, who holds their program in such high regard, was behind Washington State in said numbers. So, yes, those were very interesting. Now, does that mean that you need to go get Washington State? No, it does not. I have yet to see anybody tell me that those numbers really signify anything totally significant. But it is something to at least give you some pause, or at least make you do a double take here and think, like, all right, maybe big picture, it's more like, all right, what does that actually mean for the TV numbers at large? How much stock should we be putting into what we think of as what really matters with the TV numbers, or who we think of as having the best TV numbers? Like, maybe it's time to take a step back and say there could be some other variables at play here. And, I mean, we've seen some things flow. There's been whispers about, like, the Big Ten having some interest in TCU, which wouldn't, on its surface, you think, like, what kind of a fit is that? And what are they going for? Obviously, just the Dallas market, like DFW. But TCU literally this week wouldn't sell single game football tickets to their game against Texas Tech because they're too worried about it getting overtaken by Tech fans. Like, small enrollment, small fan base, small stadium that won't even fill up. And that's Big Ten material. I don't know, but apparently DFW would mean that much to the Big Ten. So, like, there's just a lot of that, like, reading between the lines that I think maybe we think we know more than we do, or there are answers out there that perhaps we don't already have at our fingertips. So valuable thing to bring up, I think, Matt. Eric, what's up, Eric? Thank you for the donation. Eric says, how can ESPN college football commentators talk about realignment, et cetera? Don't they have a conflict of interest? Interesting point. I think, like, your typical, like, color guy or broadcaster or whatever, I guess you could say conflict of interest, but I don't know. I mean, it's their job to talk about the sport. I'm not going to I guess I have a lot of mixed feelings on that, right? Like if you're going to be doing the job appropriately, you have to be talking about the sport at large at times, even if you're doing a game broadcast, but especially if you're just doing studio shows or whatever. But I don't think that like the individual broadcasters are really tied into enough like what's happening on a big picture level that I would worry about it too much. Now, maybe if you want to say, hey, like producers are directing some of this and trying to control narratives, and that really, but to me, that all goes up to the top. Like that starts at the top. So I would just be more worried about what's going on at the top of ESPN there. But I share in your frustration sometimes because I'm not sure that I fully explained this story last time, but I got completely attacked by the Oklahoma fan base for expressing frustration of the fact that on Wednesday and Thursday at Big 12 Media Days, you had Dusty Dvorak and Andre Ware as the two analysts that were talking about everything and breaking it down. And look, Dusty Dvorak is a pro. He's very good. And really, to be honest with you, if I had it to do it again, I would probably have left him on the tweet and focused more on Andre Ware because that was more frustrating. But in general, to me, it was frustrating to see the representation for the Big 12 being an Oklahoma student, like a guy who played at Oklahoma, and then Andre Ware, who, yes, is a Houston grad. He also went on a national TV broadcast less than a year ago and called Houston going to the Big 12 a lateral move. That to me is extremely frustrating. Like that's what ESPN rolls out there. And when we do have all this evidence, like Bob Bowlesby last year, that ESPN has really tried to bleep over this conference many times, then yes, it gets very frustrating when you see that as the representation. Now, Oklahoma fans took that as a total referendum on, or a total commentary on Dusty Dvorak's ability, and I just got pounded, including him actually responding, which, like, I understand, but Oklahoma fans just being overly sensitive kind of took that way too far. But my point is, that's a long way of saying, Eric, I get your frustration there. I don't know that I would believe that the actual broadcasters are in on some overall bigger picture thing here. I think it all starts at the top, obviously, with how ESPN's negotiating, and then trickles down through some of the producers and storylines and narratives and all that stuff, back to how they really helped prop up the SEC for a long time. So I get it. I would just shy away a little bit from making specific accusations at those guys, other than being like, look, like Andre Ware, that was a stupid thing to say, and that to me is something that should raise an eyebrow or two if you're thinking about throwing him then on the broadcast for Big 12 Media Days. But that's like him actually directly coming out and saying something. Most guys, like Dvorak's not saying anything. He's being a total pro. Like, that's fine. I can stomach that. Matt says, thank you for the donation, Matt. Matt says, why is there a national narrative that Washington and Oregon are bigger brands than anybody in the Big 12? Said on the Athletic Pod. I've never met a Washington fan in my life. Well, I mean, look, I think they are bigger brands. Oregon clearly is. I just say what you will about Oregon. That is a brand. And Nike has been the catalyst for most, if not all of that, but it is a reality whether you like it or not. That's a school that can recruit nationally. That's a school that people pay attention to nationally, even if they may have fallen off a half step from where they were at their true peak. This isn't like national championship game Oregon, but they're still a massive brand. Washington, I think, still has a lot of appeal. That's still a fairly national brand. I think it's to a lesser extent than Oregon. Washington, if you wanted to start talking to me about like Washington versus BYU, Washington versus maybe like Oklahoma State, I think we can start to have conversations like that, but I still think Washington probably gets the edge there. Now, if you want to say people shouldn't be acting like Washington and Oregon would waltz into the conference and just dominate the conference, that's a completely different discussion. But I would give the edge to them brand-wise. I mean, like I've told you guys, I'm in favor of giving Oregon and Washington a concession, allowing them free reign to leave for the Big Ten whenever, and just signing them up for the conference to get them on board. I'm cool with all of that because they are brands that do mean something. Now, they don't mean something to clear the threshold of the Big Ten and the SEC, as we've clearly seen and found out, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't really help out a Big 12, ACC, or Pac-12 who are still waiting there trying to jockey for a position to be the third best league. So is there a sentiment? This again, Matt, is where I'll get back to, I think, some of the issues here. Is there a sentiment from like the guys in the Athletic, like Andy Staples, I know, who was like personally fighting with Scott, K-State fan, podcaster, does the Bosco's Boys podcast, going after him about Big 12 fans being overly sensitive and just still seemingly a lack of respect for the Big 12 schools and Big 12 fans. Yes, I do think that in general still exists there. And some of that you're going to hear later on in this show because of Stuart Mandel's latest article. So, yes, I do think those narratives still exist. And sometimes it comes across too pointed against the Big 12, but I would still give Washington and Oregon the edge in terms of brand value in the conference. Christian, appreciate the donation. Christian says, have you been to any of the new Big 12 stadiums? Will you be covering games by then? Get the opportunity to check them out. Go Cougs. Well, the plan right now would not be to be covering games. I think my covering games days are probably over unless something really changes. I don't know. I'm kind of just feeling things out in life right now. Have I been to any of the stadiums? I've not been to UCF. I've been to Kissimmee, Florida once, not specifically Orlando. That was to do K-State baseball. I've been to Houston. I've covered a Texas Bowl, two Texas Bowls. Been to two Texas Bowls, covered one Texas Bowl in Houston, but have never been to Houston Stadium. I went to Rice's Stadium once because K-State was practicing there before the 2016 Texas Bowl. But so I have not been to Houston Stadium. BYU, I have not been to Utah. So unfortunately, I've not had a chance to check that out. And Cincinnati, have not been to Cincinnati. So yeah, I have not been to any of the new stadiums. Now, if your question is, would I potentially go there to watch K-State play? Hell yes, I would. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it'll just be me in like chill mode, having a good time, I would anticipate, as opposed to me covering a game there. But nothing wrong with that, right? So yeah, hopefully I'll get a chance to meet some of you guys when that happens. Ask my boys in Lubbock. I legitimately met up with some folks when I was in Lubbock covering Big 12 track and field, doing the TV broadcast for that a couple months ago. Joe, appreciate the donation, Joe. I don't see a comment with that, Joe, but thank you very much. Appreciate the support there. I see Golden Blue Dude says he'll be in Morgantown for 4 games this year. If you drop by, I got your back. Hey, man, appreciate that as always. You guys know I love me some Morgantown. I doubt that I'll be making the trip there this year, but I have been 4 or 5 times going back to 2012 for every K-State game. It sans 2020. So 12, 14, 16, 18. I guess I've been there 4 times. Would love to make it a 5th at some point. Probably not going to be this year, but I appreciate that. Much appreciate the offer. Okay. So as I get going here, the $ below the chat box is how you donate. That's how you make sure your question or comment gets into the chat. Also supports the work that I'm doing here on the channel in bringing you Big 12 content week in and week out. So that's how you can continue to control some of the narrative here on this chat. Also, like the video if you have not. We have a lot more people filing in here. Please do like the video. I would appreciate that as well. Let's talk about this UCF rumor, okay? Let's talk about this. UCF to the SEC, question mark. This is from the Dan Patrick Show. Dan Patrick, this is his quote on UCF. Dan Patrick said, a source told me what could happen in the SEC. Clemson, Miami, and Florida State are in the on-deck circle. If the SEC goes down this road, Central Florida could be on the radar. Now, after that, there were a handful of other schools like Georgia Tech, Duke, I believe, was one. Yeah, there were a couple other schools listed after Central Florida. But beyond the 3 that I think most people have connected to the SEC, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, next on that list was UCF. And if you're thinking about adding round numbers here, if that's what the SEC wanted to do, there would be 3, and then UCF was rattled off 4th by Dan Patrick. So it's hard to know if that's all specifically in that order for a reason. It's hard. I mean, we don't know who the source was to Dan Patrick, but Dan is not somebody that's just going to throw something out there completely on a whim just to see if it sticks. So to me, that does have more validity to it. Interesting part of all that is, well, there are a lot of very interesting parts of this comment. One of them being that I feel a little bit personally vindicated by hearing that, because when people have asked me, like, who will perform the best, who will be the hottest team out of the new 4 that joined the league, I've consistently said, I feel like UCF has the highest upside. I mean, it's hard for me to say, hey, first 5 years, I think this school will be the best and perform the best, because it's just a really difficult thing to predict. But if we're just going with like long-term growth curve here, UCF didn't even have a football program until 79. They didn't play FBS football until 96. You think about that growth curve and what it looks like compared to every other school here, it's insane. UCF has a massive student population. They have a very young, hungry alumni base. They're all pumping in money right now. They have a lot of resources. Like the athletic department is very much on board with pushing this thing forward right now. I love the potential of UCF. And so I did feel a little bit vindicated by seeing like, oh, the SEC apparently is keeping an eye on what's going on with UCF there. And that is an SEC that already has a stakeholder in the state of Florida with the Florida Gators. And then conceivably in this scenario would also be getting Florida State and Miami. And so I guess that would be a move by the SEC to just completely lock down that state. Like nobody else is getting into Florida at all. We're taking anybody that's in a Power 5 conference from the state and taking them to be our own. Now, I don't think this means, to steal our favorite conference realignment word, that any of this is like imminent and going to happen right now. The phrasing that Dan had used for Florida State, Miami, and Clemson was, again, that they were in the on-deck circle. So it's not like they're there right now. And the SEC, we did just see that report from Saturday Down South that the SEC for now is basically standing down and being like, look, we're good. And we also understand that for our viability, we need the sport as a whole to be viable. And so it does. I do believe that there will be a pause for now from the SEC there. But it's something to keep an eye on, that if and when the time comes where dominoes start to fall again, if and when the time comes where the SEC decides that they want to get back into that fray, UCF is probably going to be one of the schools that is considered there. And, I've even had people tell me that, it was a mistake or seen the idea, the thought that it was a mistake for the Big 12 to add like UCF and Houston, or take your pick. Basically any of the three besides BYU, which seems to be a consensus. And again, TV consensus was that would add something to the league. The other three, I've seen people debate, like maybe the Big 12 should not have added all four of those teams because now it's going to make things more crowded if you try and raid the Pac-12. I don't know. This lends some credence to me that the Big 12 did the right thing by grabbing UCF. If they're even worthy of being on the SEC's like kind of next up list, that's some justification and vindication for the Big 12 adding UCF. To me, it sure is. If it's an asset that is valuable enough for the SEC at some level, it means that it's definitely an asset that is valuable enough for you right now. So I think that's another angle to this, is like some vindication for UCF and those who were certainly happy with them coming to the league. I would also have to, as we're on the topic here of UCF, I would have to give a shout out to what I saw were some incredible billboards. Speaking of Florida, that were like on, it was like in Gainesville or on the way to Gainesville, the highway by Gainesville. There were billboards put up by UCF that would say like, "Hey, X number of miles to the future of college football," with UCF branding and logos on it. That was very well done. But anyway, keep an eye on UCF. I think this is something just to put on the back burner. I think it's kind of in the same vein as the whispers that we have seen out there on Twitter about the Big Ten having some level of interest in TCU, like that would at least be something on their radar. I think these are both just like on the radar sorts of conversations. But again, think about like where we've been in this whole process. And there have been, lots of talks about Texas Tech and Oklahoma State being perhaps the two most valuable commodities here a year ago when we were talking about who would be coveted by other leagues. And now we're sitting here and it's like, oh, maybe it's actually TCU and UCF that would be the most valuable commodities that the Big 12 hangs on to. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and Kansas seem to be the three that at least internally within their fan bases had made the most noise about seemingly being coveted, with Kansas obviously at the front of that list. And now here we are, UCF and TCU apparently are higher up on the wish list, which brings it all back to how much football is in control of this, man. It is football. And you can see the potential there with UCF, and the Dallas market and the state of Texas is always going to speak pretty loudly. So if you have any kind of foothold, any kind of stake in the state of Texas, it does matter. Matt, I see Matt says, congrats to Texas Tech on their $200 million facility announcement. Thank you, Matt. We did discuss that on last Wednesday's show. I think that had dropped either the day of or the day before. So we did get plenty of talk about that in, but you guys know how I feel about Texas Tech. There is a lot of commitment right there in a very good way happening for the Red Raiders. All right, we're going to talk Big 12 Pac-12 merger, and this is where I will start to get a little bit frustrated. I can guarantee you that. This is the part of the chat where I will start to get a little bit frustrated here at what some of the ink is that's being written. But I will remind you, if you want to get your question or comment in here on the chat tonight, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you do that. You can also like the video. I would appreciate that as well. That costs you nothing. But if you want to make sure that you get on the chat here and hit me up with a question or comment, you can do so by donating. See, Michael. Michael says BYU fans happy with the Big 12, not the Big 10 or the SEC. And that was in response to somebody. It looks like Bubba is a Utah fan, I'm guessing, just by this one blurb that I'm seeing here. Utah wins the Pac-12 this year. Easy, goes to the college football playoff. Well, that seems very in line with Utah fans from what I've learned over the last, 2 weeks or so. Very interesting. Utah fans, very, very high opinion of their program. Okay, does anybody actually want a merger here between the Big 12 and the Pac-12? It sounded great a year ago. At this point, it feels like the leverage is completely tilted. It is the total opposite scenario, and that it would be a bit of an act of charity for the Big 12 to link up with the Pac-12 and up everybody's TV value. But Dennis Dodd wrote about it this week. Stuart Mandel wrote about it this week. It seems to be gaining more steam as things have really settled. And I don't know. I'm torn between trying to decide if this is these guys really pushing this based on like they think this is actually something that can happen, or if this is more like, well, we need to keep covering the realignment story and things have settled down and the SEC says they're going to stop and Notre Dame's probably not going to do anything and the Pac-12 is waiting on its TV window and its TV numbers. So there's really not anything that's going to happen. So we might as well, like, this would be the time to speculate about it. And I feel like it's more that probably than anything, but it just frustrates the hell out of me the way this all gets framed. All right. So let's read from Dennis Dodd first, which was a little more innocuous, I would say. But Dennis Dodd says, everything else has become a scramble to the point that one source within the Big 12 said a worst case scenario would be nothing happening in the league. That would mean staying at 12 teams with BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF in the fold after Texas and Oklahoma leave before the 2025 season. I'm going to stop right there. I would disagree with that on a number of levels. I don't think that is a bad scenario. I think that's a fine scenario for the league. I still think they would be perfectly okay. That's number one. Number two, I don't think that's the worst case scenario. I think the worst case scenario still would be somehow things get engineered on the back end by ESPN or whatever it's going to be to have a handful of Big 12 schools leave for the Pac-12. Now, I still think that's very, 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 very unlikely, but that is a worst case scenario. Or so UCF does get picked off by the SEC, like something else happens and you start getting schools pulled away. We've seen enough to know that is at least within the realm of possibility. So that's your worst case scenario. So I don't know. Dodd has quoted a lot. There have been some weird things quoted from Big 12 sources before, like very early on when there was one that was, why would we want the Pac-12 schools anyway? More or less there, as I paraphrase. But so I don't know what to really think of that. But I would disagree with that being a bad thing, and I would disagree with that being the worst case scenario. Anyway, more from the article. It says, some Big 12 athletic directors are worried that the conference's media rights dollars won't stretch far enough to add more programs without their payouts being diminished. Outgoing Commissioner Bob Bowlesby testified last summer Texas and Oklahoma brought 50% of the rights value to the league. Okay, yes, we do know that. And look, I get it if there would be some ADs worried that they're if you're going to add 4 schools, if you're going to add the 4 corner schools, I've said before, like, you're not getting rich from that. I think at best you're going to break even in terms of every school's payout, but you're doing it for long-term survival. So what I would tell those athletic directors is take a deep breath and look at the big picture here. Yeah, maybe it's going to cut $2-3 million, $4-5 million from you per year for a little while now. But what if that ensures an extra 10 years of viability for you having a seat at the big boy table? Well, that's a hell of a lot more money than the 5 million a year, or whatever you want to use as the example that you would be losing right now. You're coming out way ahead long run here. So do it, kill another conference, and start positioning yourself as the third best. And that also, by the way, is positioning yourself as being the landing spot for ACC schools when the ACC inevitably breaks up here, okay? Which could then increase your value at that point. Like, that's just such a short-sighted way of thinking to me. If you're gonna be worried to the point where it would be like a legitimate obstacle here. So I don't know. That is concerning to me. But once again, I mentioned take this stuff with a grain of salt. Says the same reality is emerging for the Pac-12. Even with Oregon and Washington, the 2 best brand names remaining among the 22 schools still in the Big 12 and Pac-12, there is not much on which the conference can capitalize. So then he says, do the math. There seems to be a consensus forming among key parties that the Big 12 and Pac-12 would be worth more together in some form than they are separately. And then here's a quote from Bobby Hacker, who is a West Coast attorney and sports media consultant who spent 18 years as the VP of Business and Legal Affairs at Fox Sports. He says, quote, let's say the bloodletting stops at SC and UCLA. Right there, you can't get an increase in rights fees because you lose the LA market. He says, now you have the Pac-12, which had less of valued rights deals than any Power 5 group. They've now lost the LA market. There are no teams here with which to replace it. And if you say we're going to get San Diego State, there's pushback because they don't have the academic cachet that those schools had. If Oregon and Washington go, Katie bar the door, the option to my mind's eye is a Big 12 merger. Okay, what that just did was lay out like the Pac-12 perspective here. Yes, the Pac-12 was already in line to have the worst TV deal of any of the Power 5 conferences. They already had the worst deal, the worst payout for fiscal year 2021 of any of the Power 5 conferences, and then lost LA. Of course, if Oregon and Washington leave, it's Katie bar the door. People are going to be jumping. And yes, that would lead you to believe, hey, a Big 12 merger would be great. ... for the Pac-12. Like all Dennis Dodd just did in that article is outline why the Pac-12 would want this very badly. There's not a case for why the Big 12 would want this very badly, other than one quote there just of somebody saying, hey, worst case scenario would be we do nothing. Well, worst case scenario, you do nothing, or worst case scenario, you throw a lifeboat to your competition. None of this makes any sense for the Big 12 to say that this would be the way to go. Here's the last little piece of this blurb. It's literally the entire blurb. The Pac-12 is in exclusive negotiations with Fox and ESPN. The Big 12 continues to study expansion. New Commissioner Brett Yormark made that official with his open for business comment last week. The Big 12 wants to be hipper, younger, cooler. There's not much that's hip, young, and cool about an Iowa State-Cincinnati game, which, first of all, ouch. I mean, good God, Dennis. I hope that there are a lot of Iowa State and Cincinnati fans filling up the mentions there. Nothing young, hip, and cool about an Iowa State-Cincinnati game. By the way, Dennis Dodd, all these national media guys are the ones propping up Matt Campbell as like pretty young, hip, and cool. And Luke Fickell is pretty young, hip, and cool. Like, come on, man. You're really going to trash Iowa State, Cincinnati like that? I'm sorry. And look, you guys know my differences with Iowa State, but I'll defend you on that one. Get out of here. Like what? We'd rather watch Washington State play Cal? Is that young, hip, and cool? Because a lot of what you'd be taking on in a merger here is dead weight. Like that's the other part of this merger. Like, you know who wants a Pac-12, Big 12 merger is Oregon State and Washington State. But like outside of that, I don't know that there are a lot of places that really want that very badly right now. There seems to be some hesitancy from the four corner schools to totally jump. Oregon and Washington, like it's kind of like a worst case scenario for them to wind up linked up with the Big 12 at some level. So like who is wanting this except maybe like Kliavkov, the Pac-12 as a whole, or the most vulnerable schools in the Pac-12, like Cal, Washington State, and Oregon State. It does not make any sense. And it just still seems to be like this, just brush aside the Big 12, like, oh, the Big 12 is always the damsel in distress. They clearly need help somehow. So the Pac-12 actually needs help now, so they should link together. It feels like just an assumption that the Big 12 still needs help. Let's get those TV numbers in. Let's see what the Pac-12 finds out about their deal. Let's see what Brett Yormark is able to figure out for the Big 12 about the deal. Again, the guy who had the Fox Sports president in his press release quoted. Let's see what Brett Yormark is able to figure out about what the value is of this conference, because I still suspect this goes with the Navigate numbers. This goes with the way everything was trending, the Pac-12's financial struggles anyway, the state of flux that they're in. All these things would lead you to believe that the current Big 12, even with Oregon and Washington still in the Pac-12, could fetch a number equal to or greater than what the Pac-12 has right now. The play is to go for killing the Pac-12. It is not to go link with them. I'm sorry. Joe, thank you for the donation. Joe, I just see a thank you sticker. No message there. Appreciate you as always, my guy. Thank you, Joe. Our web, thank you for the donation. Our web says you may take a pay cut in 2024, but once the college football playoff expands in 2026 and the money from that will more than pay for the expansion. Yes, piggybacking on my comment there about why would you be worried about a couple $1 million here or there going down on a per school basis if you were to add schools from the Pac-12? Exactly right. You have to be thinking bigger picture with all of that. Like, yes, the money will only get greater and greater. I'm sure you're going to be signing shorter term rights deals now. Nobody's going to be signing things away for like 20 years like the ACC did, because everyone's seeing how that's worked out. So there will be more chances to get back to the bargaining table and raise like up the ante there. And what you want to do is still be in a conference that can go to the bargaining table, which means if you pull teams from the Pac-12, you're going to be in a better position to do that. So yeah, right there in lockstep with you, R-Web. Robert says, thank you for the donation, by the way, Robert. Robert says, remember the WAC imploding in 98? If there was a merger, you'd see the best brands forming its own conference. History rhymes. Mark Twain. History rhymes. Mark Twain. You know what, Robert? I don't remember much about the WAC imploding in 1998, unfortunately. I was 9 years old in 1998, and I was much too concerned with just the biggest heartbreak in sports history, which is K-State being a double overtime loss to Texas A&M away from playing for a national championship in 1998. So I don't remember much about how the WAC imploded there. But the merger, look, I mean, I guess the one way. Here's the thing with the merger. It's like if you're going to go with a merger, right, you can't be sitting there being like, oh, we'll take anybody from the Pac-12. Like, we'll take the whole league. You'd have to be a little choosy, right? You don't want to bring on the dead weight of Oregon State and Washington State. And the Pac-12 doesn't have the leverage right now to really protect them. So then you start going, all right, well, we don't need that. Let's just pick the best brands here from the Pac-12 to come in for this merger. And then what do we have? Well, you're talking about pulling in like 4 to 6 schools from the Pac-12, which, oh, by the way, has made us come full circle, because that's all we've been saying that the Big 12 should be doing, is looking at taking the 4 to 6 schools, the 4 corners, and potentially Oregon and Washington from the Pac-12. And we're right back to where we started. And so it's just how dumb I think this whole merger idea and merger talk is right now. It just pulls you back to the Big 12 should be in the game of taking the best that it can from the Pac-12, the cream of the crop, and not dealing with any of the extra BS. And now you're right back at plucking away the schools that have already been talked about here. So I find this a little annoying and foolish. And I haven't even gotten to the Stuart Mandel piece of this yet. Christian says, thank you for the donation. Christian, much appreciate you, my friend. Christian says, with Arizona reportedly lusting to go to the Big 12, can't they just start the avalanche of transfers by agreeing now? It forces everyone else's hand and gets them where they want to be. Well, I am definitely in line with that kind of thinking, Christian. I would love it. I think right now, anybody moving anywhere sends shockwaves and kind of like panic through everybody, and obviously shows further instability within the conference. So I'm totally with it. Like, I had seen somebody saying, well, you could go grab Arizona and San Diego State and take away the Pac-12's best expansion option. I do understand why you would do that, but that to me, when there are still other Power 5 schools there and probably ready to come if Arizona were to officially pull loose, I'd be on board with doing that and just bringing them in on their own and waiting for the rest to follow. And even if somehow it does end up with just Arizona being there, again, give it a year, see what happens, wait and see if more will follow later. Figure out your scheduling. It'll be fine. You can make do. You can make it work. This is a zero-sum game where you need to go take out your opponents. So, yes, I'm very much with that. My guess would be that Arizona, even if they are lusting for the Big 12 right now, is sitting back and saying, well, let's see at least what these Pac-12 numbers are going to be. We think we may know what they're going to be and that they're not going to be very good, but let's just wait and see officially what it is that Kliavkov is able to drum up there, and then we'll have more data, more information to make a better decision here, or at least feel better about our decision. Feel like we gave it our due diligence. I think that's what I would call it. I would bet that these Pac-12 schools right now are really doing their due diligence in allowing some of the TV stuff to play out and seeing what exactly it is that they would be getting. Bud, as always, thank you, my friend, for the donation. Very much appreciated. Bud, generous as always, says, thanks for the good work, John. LubbockGuesthouse.com. If you are going to Lubbock, need a place to stay in the LBK, LubbockGuesthouse.com. If you are a TCU fan and you are needing to come pay your respects to Daddy after what happened on Twitter this week, you can stay in a Lubbock Guest House, courtesy of Bud, LubbockGuesthouse.com. Thank you, Bud. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, TCU. That was a little mean, but hopefully we'll have some time to cover that story before I get out of here. It was not a great look for the old Frogs. One Choice, thank you for the donation. I see message retracted, but I appreciate the donation there. If you guys want to donate and make sure your question or comment gets in on the chat tonight, you can click the $sign below the chat box where it says say something and do so that way. You can also just like the video if you want to help support the channel. I would appreciate that. And, of course, donating in any form just helps support the work that I'm doing, bringing you Big 12 content regularly here throughout the week. All right, Trevor. Trevor says, odds Oregon or Washington or both go independent. I don't know. That to me feels pretty unlikely just because how you get paid that way. It's just like a monetary problem. Um, you know, NBC has the deal with Notre Dame, but like, are you going to get somebody to agree to televise? Are you going to get a TV deal with somebody like that? Like Oregon and Washington are good brands. I don't think they're like that level of brand. Um, I think that would be pretty difficult. I think their best move by far would be to just join whatever they feel like the best and most lucrative second tier conference is going to be. You join it for a while and you probably leverage your way into either a cheap or free exit to the Big Ten if and when they come calling, and then you just sit and bide your time and wait. I think that's really the play there if you're Oregon or Washington. I have my doubts that there would be legitimate viability to them being able to go independent. Okay, so let's hop back in here to what Stuart Mandel said. So I gave you the outline there, the merger talk from Dennis Dodd at CBS Sports. Here it is from Stuart Mandel. Mandel says, well, the conference he's talking about the Pac-12 here. Well, that conference is stabilized. Oh, I'm sorry. He's talking about the Big 12. My bad. Okay. Think Big 12 here. He says, well, the Big 12 has stabilized itself nicely. The 10-team Pac-12 still holds more TV leverage. Okay. The Pac-12 still holds more TV leverage. Its new TV deal comes up a year sooner. It has the two biggest TV brands in Oregon and Washington who do not appear to be coveted by the Big Ten. And it's got Pac-12 After Dark, a major selling point for ESPN in particular, which loves filling those late night slots with quality games. But there's at least one viable scenario in which both the Big 12 and Pac-12 could leverage the latter's current instability. They could merge. Okay, let's stop here. The Pac-12 has more TV leverage. Like, Stuart, man, I say it a lot. People get real frustrated with him. I get real frustrated with him. Stand-up guy. He's done the YouTube channel. He's done my old radio show. I don't think he is a dummy. But this to me feels like Pac-12 homer talk. And he is somebody based on the West Coast. And anyway, we've seen how the college football media generally at large has treated all of this anyway. The Pac-12 having more TV leverage. Come on, man. The Pac-12 already had the lowest payout for fiscal year 2021 of anybody. Yes, some of that pandemic impacted, I understand, but their finances have not been in a good place. The Pac-12 network is a disaster. They've just been absolutely rocked by losing USC, which was clearly by far the best brand that they had. A wider gap between USC and Oregon and Washington than I certainly would have anticipated. There's no stability there with Oregon and Washington, by the way. This whole idea that they have TV leverage, how are you getting Oregon and Washington to sign on the dotted line for giving up their grant of rights for any kind of period of time here? There is, and so that to me makes it somewhat negligible, like what their brand impact would be on a TV deal here and the TV leverage at this point. Like Oregon and Washington are loose cannons. They're going to be gone the second that they can be. So you've lost, not only have you lost USC, you've lost the stability of Oregon and Washington because they're just sitting there and waiting, ready to jump. So what is the actual value there then in that? Because you're either going to have to just bring them on while giving them free reign to leave for the Big Ten whenever they want to, or they're not going to sign anything long-term. That just seems, God, and the Navigate numbers that we saw, they would not indicate that the Pac-12 is in like a better or significantly better position than the Big 12 from a TV standpoint. The Big 12 is stable. And by the way, the Big 12 will also have at least some competition for that after dark time slot because BYU, how many times have I talked about on this channel that BYU has come out and said, we'll be good partners here. We'll play ball. We'll do the 8:30 p.m. kickoff thing, 8:30 Central p.m. kickoff, and give basically you a version of Big 12 after dark. Like that's already there. I just, that one made me mad. That one made me mad. If you guys can't tell, that had me very, very frustrated. He goes on to say, Mandel in the article, John Wilner of the Mercury News wrote an excellent piece earlier this week explaining why this seemingly radical idea actually makes a lot of sense in the New World Order. A combined Big 12, Pac-12 wouldn't be on par with the newly turbocharged Big 10 and SEC, but it would become the clear number 3. It would boast 3 playoff participants in Oregon, Washington, and Cincinnati, and 12 schools that have appeared in a New Year's Six Bowl since 2014. By comparison, the ACC has 2 playoff participants and has had 6 New Year's Six participants. Perhaps most pertinently, the combined leagues, with the help of a couple of expansion ads, would boast 10 of the nation's top 30 TV markets, and consolidating their upcoming TV deals into one would likely create more competition among bidders, be it traditional partners like ESPN and Fox or streaming services like Apple and Amazon. Quote, both leagues would make more by working together than they would separately, former Fox Sports executive Patrick Crates told Wilner. I just still think this is much more of a kill or be killed environment instead of throwing a life raft there. I will admit, like, it's a compelling point if you say, like, hey, you're just going to merge and be the third best conference and wait for the ACC to implode and then scoop up some more of those schools and you just wind up at like one big conglomerate conference. Like, I guess I see where you're going with that, but I still think there would be too much dead weight. He's also talking about expansion candidates, which I would imagine would be like San Diego State. I don't know who else you're planning on getting there to get the big TV markets, but it just feels like there would be too much dead weight with all of that. And you would have to start cutting, just like we talk about the Big Ten and the SEC cutting, to like actually truly make that worth your while from a media rights standpoint. So look, I mean, should Brett Yormark consider it? Sure. Like, go consider everything you possibly can. I certainly trust his judgment in making major moves like this. But that to me seems like something that would be a charity case for the Big 12, just helping out the Pac-12. And the way that it continues to be framed up is just always annoying, always very annoying. The Pac-12 does not have the leverage right now. And I think that will change again once they get whatever feedback they're going to get in the next 30 to 60 days from TV. So wait and see. Let's see on that and hope that this is just some fodder being thrown out there because things have sort of slowed down from a realignment front as of right now. Nuck, thank you for the donation. Nuck says, I feel like realignment has been an excuse for sports news articles to make an excuse to be retweeted or published in FSN, ESPN, CBS, et cetera. It's annoying. Yeah. I mean, you've heard me say this multiple times. I mean, obviously there's a part of realignment that is incredibly interesting, fascinating, also like worrisome and nerve-wracking when you're a fan of a school like K-State that could very well be left out at the end of the day when all is said and done and the dust totally settles. But the other thing is, it's annoying that like everybody seems to have a rumor. Everybody wants to throw it out there. Everybody wants to try and get their piece of the realignment pie by throwing that out. And that's why, like, I try very careful. I will give you what I think are the most credible reports that are out there and talk about them. I don't try and be inside info guy because, yes, I do find that to be very annoying. So I'm imagining that's kind of along the same lines of where you're at right there. And if that is what you're talking about, that is where I'm going with that. Let's see. All Blue 12. Missed my comment above. Go Cougs, go Big 12. Thank you, All Blue 12. Appreciate that. That would be a BYU Cougs. BYU Cougs. Not the Houston Cougs. I learned it's spelled Coogs. I'm going to give you like a 5 to 10 minute warning here. I would say we got about 5 to 10 minutes left before I get out of here from this show. So if you have something that you want to make sure gets in, do it now. Donate by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you can get your question or comment on the show and support the work that I'm doing here to bring you Big 12 content regularly. You've got about 5 or 10 minutes there if you want to do that. So make sure that you do get that in right now. All right. See, the next thing that comes up on my outline, I have to chuckle because, I've had my battles with Oklahoma fans here as of late. And this one is about Oklahoma fans. Caleb Williams, in an article with the LA Times, revealed some of why he arrived at USC, how he got to the point where he left Oklahoma, decided to leave Oklahoma to go to USC. So let me just start here. It says, Carl, who is Caleb Williams' dad, it says, Carl says that a return to Oklahoma was initially atop the list of options until the school and its fan base pushed Caleb Williams away. He says, quote, we didn't know what we were going to do. And honestly, when we went to the portal, Oklahoma was at the top of the list, but they did some things that weren't in his best interest. According to the LA Times, Carl, Caleb, and everyone in his camp were dismayed by the reaction of Sooner fans who were extremely salty after Riley left. Well, you can say that again. And when Williams entered the portal, where the Williams family expected Oklahoma fans who had anointed him as the savior after pulling the largest comeback against Texas in school history to support his decision and encourage him to come back, they turned on him without remorse. Carl told the LA Times that he resented how every step was geared to force Caleb into a hurried, emotional decision, including coaches who questioned why he would look around at all. He also shared the same thing he told Oklahoma coaches during the process. So it sounds like not only Oklahoma fans, but Oklahoma coaches were a piece of this too, trying to force him into a rushed decision. But not reflecting real well on you Oklahoma fans. And I understand, in general, most fan bases are created pretty equal. you're going to have fans that would react similarly to that situation across the board. I wouldn't deny that. The thing is, Oklahoma fans thought they were too big to fail, too big for that. And this has been my point on it the whole time, why he's been so damn funny to watch ever since Lincoln Riley left him high and dry. Oklahoma fans were above that, right? That was a program that would not have to deal with that. Well, they did. And not only did you cry after your coach left, but you prevented any chance of keeping the quarterback around, who is much better than Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback that you wound up with, because of the way that you reacted. And everybody reacted just insanely. And it is still there, showing by the sensitivity that we saw last week for a comment about Dusty freaking Dvorak. Okay. So Oklahoma fans, this is just another, I'm just saying, maybe just chill a little bit, take a step back. Remember this when Brent Venables loses 3 games this year. You guys scared off the last quarterback. You may not want to do that again. Okay. So when Venables rolls out a 9-3 season there in the Big 12, of all places, in the Big 12 this year, just don't freak out too much. Okay. That is my message to you. A couple donations here. Matt, thank you for the donation. Matt says, thoughts on Yormark saying he might negotiate the OU UT exit fee since they can't afford it. Maybe we can get something good out of it. I'm glad you brought that up, Matt, because that is a quote that I did see from Yormark. And I believe it did not come on the podium. It came when he was doing like a side session with some other reporters who I would imagine were Texas reporters who, I mean, just the tone of some of the questions being asked even at the podium to Yormark, it was eye roll inducing, acting like this conference has nothing to stand on, is totally doomed and in complete trouble. It's more arrogance. And, they're asking Deuce Vaughn multiple times why he didn't transfer, which I guess has become a Texas narrative because he was from Round Rock, which was near Austin. But, I've seen it from Jeff Ketchum, who's repeatedly tweeted that, like, just go away. Yes, there is a part of me that's like, just get them out of here. I want to hold their feet to the fire. I want the maximum amount of money. I want them to have to deal with awkward situations, all of that. But it's getting old, dude. It is getting old. The arrogance that just seeps out of that place, man. So I guess whatever Yormark thinks. Again, I'm kind of in a position where I think Yormark is so desperately what the league needs. I think he's somebody with connections and business savvy that has an understanding, even though it's not specifically in college athletics, has an understanding of what would be best in this type of scenario, that I would kind of cede the floor to him and be like, dude, I trust you. So if he thinks that that's worth at least exploring, I would trust him on that. And if he can get creative with that, and like you said, like, can we get something good out of it? If he can be creative with thinking about that and what that might be and how you could leverage that and whatever it's going to be, MHV3ER, whatever that Twitter account is, it's on there, that take it with a grain of salt, I suppose, has been right about some things. I know had floated the idea of like ESPN turning Longhorn Network into the Big 12 network in exchange for Texas and Oklahoma getting out earlier. I'd have to really think about something like that. And if I were totally on board with that being a good trade-off. But look, I'm cool with them exploring it. I am. And I know that I've been more hardline stance before Yormark was hired. I'm like, no, screw them. Like, just make them wait it out. Don't give an inch. But now we're at a point where, with realignment happening again, and seemingly like higher stakes, or at least the high stakes being moved up on the timeline a little bit here, I'm more inclined to be like, yeah, all right, maybe we can listen to that. Let's see what they have to say. Let's see what the TV networks have to say. Let's see what we could work out here. So, long story short, not a terrible thing. Not a terrible thing. I just would hope that he doesn't get strong-armed into doing something that would be not a good trade-off, but Yormark's track record would suggest that absolutely would not happen. And I still think, like, Yormark talking there, I think another thing that's important to point out, it's just clear that, like, he is still very new. Like, he is still working with the 2 jobs. He has not officially started full-time with the Big 12 yet. Like, has a lot to learn, wants to go learn all the schools, the landscape. Like, I feel like it's great that he did the press conference. I think he projected confidence for the league. I think he projected the persona that I wanted to see from him, but it was kind of a fool's errand, because he was not going to have all the answers that you really need right there. I mean, he was just thrown into an impossible situation with that. So I say that to say, who knows how much thought he's actually had time to give that as of yet, and where that sits in terms of front burner, back burner. I think we just don't know a whole lot about how that would shape out. But if you're Texas or Oklahoma, at least you would look at that and say, well, it seems like the guy's not totally shut to it. And that's a start. And that is true. Robbie, thank you for the donation, Robbie. Robbie says, Big 12 forever. Go Cats. K-State will compete for the Big 12 title this year. Well, I agree with that, Robbie. I agree with that. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for supporting K-State, as always. I do really appreciate that. All right, like a minute or two left. If you have anything last minute, get it in right now. Click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you do that. About to get out of here, but listen, I have to give a shout out to Texas Tech fans and explain to you what happened with TCU. So you guys remember basketball season, right? Basketball season, you had Texas Tech completely terrorize Texas by not only putting together an insane crowd for the game at home, but they found the code to buy single game tickets and just gobbled up all the tickets for the game at the Drum in Austin, made it sound like a Texas Tech home game. And now everybody is reacting in kind. They apparently are scared of that because TCU released that you can buy single game football tickets for every game on their home schedule except for one. You guessed it. That would be the game against Texas Tech. Now, TCU, look, I don't have any real beef with you at all, but I have covered multiple K-State TCU games there. It's a small stadium, nice stadium, but small. Amon G. Carter is pretty small, and it's never been filled up when I've been there. So I can only imagine Texas Tech with a ton of alums in the DFW area would already be filling that up. And now Tech is really feeling themselves. They're juiced up because they saw what happened last year with Texas basketball, and there's even more momentum. There's a lot of excitement with Joey McGuire. Like, I get it. I get why TCU would do that, but it is really nodding to Texas Tech and being like, yes, you guys kind of own us right now in terms of fan support. And the other part of this is that they responded on Twitter, which this is what I really don't like. So Texas Tech fan had put out a tweet saying that Texas Tech was the University of Fort Worth, and TCU's official Twitter handle responded to a Tech fan unprompted to claim TCU is the University of Fort Worth. So they did that, and then at the same time, we're not releasing tickets single game to be bought for that game against Tech because they're too scared of Tech scooping up all the tickets. So not a great look. Not a great look if you're TCU. And then later on, Jeremiah Donati, who's the athletic director at TCU, he responded to a tweet from a Texas Tech fan saying that you can actually so a Tech fan tweets at Jeremiah Donati and at TCU and says, hey, you can actually sell all your single game tickets. And Jeremiah Donati came in and responded to the guy and said, quite aware, thanks. Expect it for hoops tickets too. So TCU in 1 week claimed to be the University of Fort Worth, then at the same time wouldn't allow tickets to be sold to the Texas Tech football game, and admitted that they were not going to allow single game tickets to be sold to the Texas Tech basketball game either. Just bowing down to Tech. I mean, Tech is so far in Texas's head and now very far in TCU's head. That is just, you can't that face right now, man. Texas is and I, somebody who loves watching things like that happen on the internet, loves that aspect of college football and college sports. Tip of the cap, Tech. Tip of the cap, man. You guys, you guys are killing it right now. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. I had to give you a little shout out there. I'm sorry that it's not really getting more time here, but I wanted to make sure everybody knew that because that was a hell of an exchange that I witnessed on Twitter. Let's see. Robert says, quote, get your facts first, then you can distort them as you please. Mark Twain. Mandel's statement, are you the Pac-12 having more leverage, is just him making stuff up. Boy, we've had 2 Mark Twain quotes, man. Mark Twain getting a lot of run here on the channel, but yeah, I'm with you, Robert. Unfortunately, it feels like that's a lot of the world right now, right? Get your facts first, then you can distort them as you please, or just, breeze right on past it. I'm with you, man. I don't see the angle where that's actually accurate at all. I really don't. That Mandel would have that right, but who knows? Calico Willie, thank you, Calico Willie, for the donation. Says, hey, John, just pop it in for a second while on vacay. Ema, Calico Willie, I hope you're having a wonderful vacation. Thank you for taking some time out of that vacation to pop in here on the live chat. I hope whoever you're on that vacation with is cool with that. Shout out to whoever that is for allowing you to take some time to pop in on the chat here. That's what I got to say about that, man. People on vacation making time for the channel here. Thank you, guys. If you're watching this taped and not live, you can donate to the channel on Venmo. It's John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you'd like to support the channel that way. Tell you guys this every time, but your friends, family, whoever that you think would enjoy this, let them know about the channel. post it in your Facebook groups, different fan groups out there of schools, of the Big 12, whatever it might be. Let's continue to grow this channel, continue to grow this community. You can follow me on Twitter at JL Kurtz if you want to get in touch with me. That's the easiest way to do so. I'm typically pretty responsive there in the DMs on Twitter, though trying to cut back on my Twitter usage a little bit these days. But I still try to be pretty responsive there. So that's going to do it. Oh, I see Michael sliding in here. Michael, great show as usual. John, Neilio here. Oh, what's up, Neilio? My man, Neilio. Thank you, Neilio. Appreciate that. Oh, and Juan got in here. Juan had messaged me and said that he had a soccer game starting at the same time as the chat, but he got in just in the nick of time and said, "Go Cougs. I just finished my soccer game." All right, Juan, I hope you guys got a big dub, man. I hope you guys got a big dub. Thank you for popping in to say hey. And I think you'll enjoy the chat when you go back to look at it. I see Nuck. Do I have Patreon? I do not have a Patreon right now. The problem with Patreon is that anyway, that's probably a story for another day. I do not have a Patreon. Venmo is the easiest way to donate, in addition to right here, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you want to do that. Patreon, it's a long story. It was going to take, I was going to have to come up with different tiers and some other things to offer. And it seemed like it was going to be a little more cumbersome to do it that way. David, apparently I mispronounced your name here, David, but I'm going with David. Says, "Thanks for your work, Kurtz. I'm not on Twitter, so I don't know about your back and forth with clone fans. I prefer your channel." That's probably good. That's probably good. You might want to keep it that way. If you listen to the Cyclone Fanatic podcast, they had some words to say about more of my cohorts on the Fremont K-State podcast. But yeah, there's been a little drama with that lately. I tried to stay basically above the fray though this time around. I think you'd be proud of me. Okay, thank you guys so much. Love you all. Continue to support the channel. I will talk to you guys soon.